very efficient.
Right, my project was on the correlation between violent video games and real-world aggression. Ever since the Columbine tragedy, there's always been this idea that video games somehow led to violence in the social areas, anywhere, I guess. As far as the literature review goes, there's very, a remarkable lack of any kind of scientific studies, but everything that I could find, was either, inconclusive as to whether, there was a relationship, or was come under criticism for any number of things. One thing that I noticed was the definition of violence was often very poorly defined in these studies, and often not defined at all, to where things like Tom and Jerry would be lumped into the same category as the Terminator. As far as methods go, I used a survey model developed this month. There were 4 questions on the survey, and it was a convenient sample. Out of the 20 participants that agreed, only 15 responded before yesterday. Variables included, overall aggressiveness outside of, just video games. How much time they spend playing violent video games, and the type of violence, realistic or not. From what I gathered, the more non-realistic the violence was, actually seemed to have a lowered, or tended to lower aggressiveness in the real world, as the subjects would relieve stress and vent frustrations in a socially acceptable way. Other than that, there were no real trends found to suggest any kind of relationship between the two.
Okay, hang on one second, let me interrupt real quick. So you're saying that the more non-realistic violence that people were exposed to, there was an inverse relationship. So the more exposure, then the less aggressiveness.
Yes, according to the study and it probably isn't a good idea to generalize from just this one study, because it is a very small sample size. The nature of self-reporting, they may or may not have been 100% accurate in their assumptions of themselves, and then they were willing to participate because of the subject material, which might have a they might have wanted to debunk this stigma themselves. So, but the overall trends that all the other studies have found is that there is no real trend or relation between the two, and oftentimes there's a lot of other factors that need to be accounted for. So Any questions?
Within the literature that you read and the things that you did on this, does any of it show that, oh, how do I want to say it? That actual violence is attributed to that?
There were a lot of, variables that weren't accounted for to make it, make it possible to suggest a relationship. A lot of the people who had, violent tendencies and, played, these violent video games often had prior histories of mental
That was my next question.
issues, or social maladjustment.
So then it would have been attributed to the mental illness that they had before it would have been to a
But what do you mean by actual violence?
Hey.
So you're saying the individual was exposed to actual violence in their home and potentially have this other variable of a mental illness, which leads to that, but not anything, according to what
That
he's
has to do
saying,
with
that
the
had to do with the
games,
video
right.
games.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think were the limitations of this study?
A lot. The sample size was the biggest one. 15 people. That's not a very big sample, and
Who were actually the sample? Who were
they were volunteers from a forum online.
Oh, okay.
So
Were they all gamers?
yeah. So again, that's another limitation.
Like if you were asking parents.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It might be different.
So, anything else?
So give me an example of that's okay, non-realistic violence versus what's realistic violence in a video game.
Well, like realistic being, something like out of the Call of Duty games, depicting,
So war is real.
real guns in
Okay.
real world situations, whereas, unrealistic would be something like, Super Mario jumping on magic mushrooms.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Interesting.
So after playing like Super Mario, they would have lowered levels of aggressiveness?
Yeah.
So they would have had to have measured the level of aggressiveness prior to playing like Super Mario. And then,
Yeah, it's typically a pre-test, post-test.
Yeah.